Well, it is that time again, everybody. Hope you are doing well. My name is Bird Dog John, and I am back in action.
In those scenarios,
Yep.
it's good to neuralize the cameras. You guys know that best.
Very straightforward. Plug it in, go to the web UI, link the source, walk away. Like super simple. I keep looking over at the chat, and I keep seeing you are full of it. Tasty, spicy meat snacks. Covered in flavor. I mean, you can't go wrong. So what's going on? We've got a handful of folks here in the chat, and I really appreciate that. What's up, mate? Hey, Warren, how are you? Appreciate it. Hey, Robbie, how's it going, man? You're just talking about you. What's going on, Tom? Ahoy. How is it going? What's going on, GoWeb? Good to see you again. Thanks for hanging out with us again today. Appreciate that. Feel like I'm in this video more than anyone but John. It's true, NetApp. You are, I'm going to cut this up and put this in the next intro. Alrighty, here we go. Hopefully you're doing well. And we are... Oh, whoops-a-daisy. I need to get this over to the right one. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am indeed Bird Dog John, and back in action yet again for another beautiful Tuesday here in Auburn Hills. So I'm going to, like a good streamer, I'm going to double-check my stream and make sure that you guys can hear me. Let's have a little listen and see what it sounds like. Okay, that's picking me up all right. So I think it sounds good over on birddogjohn.tv. But you guys tell me what you think. Always interested to know how things sound on your end. So by all means, let me know how it's going. It has been kind of a quick start here in for this week, mostly because we had yesterday off. So we've got all the work of yesterday and the weekend and today all piled up. I was away. I had left on Thursday at about noon to go home, and I guess it was like, but the show ended. I left around like 1 o'clock or whatever. Well, anyways, I drove to Toronto after the show, basically. So I went home, picked up my family. We drove to Toronto, and then spent a day in Toronto, in the actual city, on Friday at a children's amusement park, a well-known Ontario children's amusement park known as Centerville on Center Island, one of the islands, the Toronto Islands, called Center Island, and then which is aptly named because it is the island in the center of the other islands. And so you know how that goes. What should we name it? No, let's just call it Center Island. So yeah, we hung out there. Kids had a great time. We all did, and then we spent Saturday and Sunday in just outside of Toronto in a town called Brampton, where my folks live, and then we drove home on Sunday. Had yesterday at home to kind of regroup, and then rolled out. So we, that was all good. So that is the story there. Now, some of you have seen that there's my title for today's show is A Case for Static Networks. And I was thinking about this, trying to think a little more about, all right, I'm pretty down on network styles that are not DHCP driven. And, maybe I should have the conversation and really try and apply some mental effort as to thinking through the actual legit reasons why someone might want to use a static network. And there are a couple out there that I know of. I'm always willing, by the way, to listen to your thoughts on why a static network might be preferred. We can debate this on Thursday when we talk about DHCP networks and the differences between the two. But I did want to kind of give it, today, networking part one, I wanted to give a legit try at understanding, why one might want to use that. You're welcome to make some comments in the comment section. You can do that over on birddogjohn.tv. And while you're over there, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, there's been a bunch of people that have done that. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Means a lot, but where that channel is slowly growing. And that's great because that gives me the opportunity to show my bosses that Bird Dog awareness is growing and that people are tuning in and that they want to learn more about this stuff, and it's all good. So the other thing that we were doing last week was playing around with heat maps. Now, full disclosure, I haven't had a chance to set this week's up. But what I can do is try and quickly get that sorted so that we can do that together here. So this was a Google form. And today we're going to set up a new So today we're going to try and set this up so that selecting a new destination for responses. And today is June the 20th. So this month is flying by. And we're going to create a new sheet, and we're going to view that inside of Google Sheets. We're going to have a quick little look over there and make sure that this is all moving in the correct direction. And then I'm going to delete last week's responses in the new Google Sheet. And then I am going to output. So I'm going to insert a chart. This is how I do this. So insert a chart inside Google Sheets, and then I have that shown on its own. So why is this full screen? There we go. Insert chart. Let's see how quickly I can put this together now that I kind of understand how this works. So I'm going to insert chart. I'm going to, oh, you know what? Whoops, I should have done this. 1 and 2. I'm going to delete this one. This. Delete. Columns B and C, create chart, insert chart. Because I want to know where you guys are hailing from. Yeah, that is always fun to find out. So, if I change it to world map, little heat map situation, and then if I say, let's aggregate these and let's show this on its own page. That's the piece that I always forget. How do I change this to say show on its own tab? View chart. It's in here somewhere. It's in here somewhere. I always forget. It's so annoying. Anyways, we'll sort this out while we chat a little bit. So, hey, jump over into the chat. Let me know how things are going. Let me know what's going on. What's going on, Tash? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Hey, it sounds and looks good. That's good. I fixed my earpiece. So last week, I didn't tuck it down my shirt, and it was driving me crazy the whole time. So now it's appropriately sitting as where it should be. So hopefully that's one less annoyance that I have to deal with here. So is this a change of thought? Static is the new DHCP? Absolutely not. It is 100% not the new norm, at least for me. There are people that, obviously believe believe that it is the new DHCP, but I personally believe that there are great ways of doing. Where are we here? There are great ways of designing your high performance NDI network. And if you're thinking about NDI like you do all other video over IP standards, you haven't spent enough time. Oh, here it is. You haven't spent enough time really understanding and thinking it through, because there are some genuine things that you probably need to understand about NDI and just the nature of it that are not the same about other AV networks. And so, all right. Now I have the map, the world map up here. Is there a way to make even this whole thing full screen? And I don't say that lightly, that you're not, that like people who gravitate towards a static installation are, somehow uneducated or something. It's just more of how networks really work, like how they genuinely pass data, and especially high bandwidth data. That's something that you have to really consider, because there is a lot going on. And let's refresh this now. Responses, accepting responses. All right, let's see if this works now. All right, folks. So the last piece of the puzzle. Sorry, I'm all over the place here right now. The last piece of this puzzle is the QR code, right? And how was I doing that before? I was doing that in StreamYard. So StreamYard, let's see if this QR code is still valid. And if it is, you're welcome to fill out the form. If it isn't, my apologies. Hey, we're all learning things here. So this is the one thing I don't appreciate is how long this takes to set up. So if I click on that, and it takes me to the yes, which country are you from? So that's fantastic. I'm not necessarily watching this show, but it is working. The link is working. So feel free to join me over on fill in your heat map information, and then I can show you all the map in which that information goes to. So here it is, and that's the heat map for today's show. So there you go. If you want your little, if you want your marker to appear, fill out that quick little Google form. You just follow the QR code there. I will also drop the QR code link. So I believe it's under forms. Yep. So I will drop that link in there. Now, I've got one person's checked in. Is that just showing states? Or I'm sorry, like countries? Because if it is, I can change that. Let me look at the last one. It appears that is what's happening here. Where are we here? The link that you can use if you want to check in, if you can't scan the QR code, I will dump it in the comments section, and you can use this link. Now, that can be found on YouTube and over on Twitch. So if you want to click that link, you have to go to one of those two. BirdDogJohn.tv is the place to be. But that link should be listed there. So the only other thing that I need to do now is probably edit this chart and say, don't aggregate? Yes, aggregate from C column. Hello, everybody. What's going on? There it is. So we've got folks checking in from all over the place, and that's pretty cool. Love it.
That's pretty neat.
All right, so we've got a handful of folks already in the response section. Let me pull it up here. And because the responses are adding, I don't want the summary. I want to view this in Sheets. There we go. I see. So San Jose, Manchester, Pasadena, Dallas, Perth, Los Angeles, and Bournemouth. So there you go. I think I'm saying that right. Welcome aboard, everybody. Welcome aboard. And there you are. I see Pasadena. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. It should be listed there. And I love this thing. I love having this as an option. It's so much fun. It's fun to see where you guys are tuning in from. So let me finish that final thought about the networking preface. The purpose of today's show really is to demonstrate more as to how you can accomplish the same goal. The thing about static, accomplish the same goal using two different styles of networks. And today we're going to legitimize and talk about how you actually do static networks, because a lot of people are used to that. They're comfortable with that. And we can't just write that off as, don't do that ever, or the way to do that is not effective. You can absolutely use a static network, but you probably should understand a few things of how it's actually working or not working and what you need to do to mitigate those those issues. And so we want to talk a little bit about that, mostly because I think it will help people finally understand, or at least there will be another resource on my channel showing how it is that you can accomplish this goal through a static configuration. There are some baseline requirements, though, for all NDI networks. And this is where people, I think, really kind of get upset about it, is because we do require certain things to be true about your network in order for it to work correctly. So I've had, let's say, discussions with all sorts of installers over the ages who are, have been doing AV installations for a very long time. They seem to understand the things that they like to buy. They're experts in those, but there's very little room for potential changing of their thoughts when it comes to doing it maybe a different way, one that will give them better results or their desired results. And so there's two things to consider here. Like, there's one, do you want to, what result do you want, right? What's the outcome that you're desiring? And if you're requiring an outcome that your current configuration can't administer, are you willing to change that? Are you willing to change either what your expectation of the outcome needs to be, or are you willing to change the way that you design the infrastructure? Those are kind of the levies that need to be moved in order for one of those or both of those statements to be true. So some people come to us and they just say, we just want to know how to do it right. I had a conversation back at NAB in 2022, so a year ago, a year ago, let's say 15 months, 16 months ago. And it was a group of people out in California who were going to be getting online a bunch of studios that people could rent. And so they wanted to use NDI. They wanted all to come back to TriCaster or vMix or something like that. And they just wanted to know, hey, we're at the planning stages. What do we do to get this working correctly? And I was able to talk to them about various styles of networking and which ones make the most practical sense. And there are different levels of where people will be interacting with the network. Like at the very base function, right? The guy that's actually running the show is going to be communicating with cameras and joysticks and whatever, and bringing those signals into his computer or his TriCaster or whatever he's using. And they'll have a very surface level interaction with the network. They'll know that the network plays a part, but they really won't know to what extent. And so that's kind of layer one, is like end user. Do you even really want the end user to know what's all involved in getting the signal from point A to point B? Then there's the installer level, where they're dangerous enough to really screw things up if they want. But they need to probably fundamentally know, hey, here is how the data travels from point A to point B. And so there's kind of the integrator or the installer level. And then there's the network level, the actual network admin guy who's able to, he understands what some simple commands are, or he has some training, or he's an expert in the switch or whatever that the network infrastructure that they're using. He has way more level, his way more understanding of what's actually happening on the network, more so than just anyone else in the chain. And that's a sliding scale. There are people who are experts in networking, or they're certified, or they're whatever, and the list goes on, and you can become more and more qualified, whatever that means, to talk about networking as much as you want. You can study for the rest of your life and become the smartest guy in the room if you want. So what do we need to know, right? And I think the static level conversation starts at the integrator installer level of knowledge. I think those people desperately need to know. The end user, like whether it works or it doesn't, they don't really care whether or not it's static or DHCP. It really comes at the level of installer, integrator, maintaining the network, that level of person, because they're going to be the ones that get the phone call when things stop working. And they may work for a while. In a standard AV static network, they will work for a little while. but then they're going to get the phone call when things stop working correctly. So the integrator installer needs to know how to answer questions, needs to know how to troubleshoot things, needs to know what's actually happening, what's not happening in an NDI static environment, and then, how to proceed forward. So that's kind of what today's hopes and dreams are, is that we'd like to discuss some of that, talk about situations, and you're welcome to throw them in the chat, by the way, about when static networks make sense. At least they make sense to you. And on Thursday, I'll be happy to debate you my preference of network versus static and how the logical reasons in which I still get to the conclusion I do after doing this for 4.5 years. Because I do think that from a networking standpoint, there are great advantages to having things configured a certain way, and you lose a lot of that when you strip away the complexities of networks and the actual processing power of the networks. You lose way more than you think you lose. So we can definitely go through that a little bit sooner than later. Static networks are what AV installers had to do before Netgear added DHCP directly into their AV line switches. It's like a family tradition where great-great-grandma always cut the legs off the turkey before she cooked it, but it turns out that it was because her oven was too small. Oh, that's great. I love that. Yes, sometimes we don't know why we do the traditions we do until we actually ask, and then we realize, oh, that doesn't make any sense because we have much larger ovens for our turkeys. Oh, that's a great soundbite. Thanks, man. That having the good stuff. So let's have a little quick look-see and see what's happening over on the heat map. Got several folks here in the U.S. If you'd like to join me on the heat map, you can do so by scanning the little QR code up on the top screen there, and then that will take you to a simple little Google form. Fill out what country you're in and what city you're in, and with the power of the interwebs and the great Google, we can basically put a pin on the map where you are. And so the map's pretty big, meaning that some of your pins will get overlapped, in particular with you folks over there in the UK. But I can actually see the entries being put on the list, and so I can call it out. If we start having overlap, we can call it out and go that route. It's been way easier to teach those learning NDI to teach them DHCP than static. It's true, and I don't know whether or not it's because old habits die hard, or there's genuine, like people have done genuine testing and whatever to prove that this is the ultimate way to do this. I mean, I agree in some respects with NetHab about, Netgear added the DHCP stuff natively into their switches. The pushback I have with that on is, New Tech University was promoting DHCP over static long before Netgear was having conversations with them about doing DHCP. And it's really helpful now that it's basically, an automatic function of the NDI profile. It's literally like, 6 clicks, and you're a full-on DHCP service running on a layer 3 switch, and you can do that for any VLAN that you're running that profile on. Actually, any of the profiles can handle DHCP. It's pretty straightforward. The one thing I haven't seen ironed out yet is the DHCP reservation function, which is the compromise that you make when you move from static, the way that people typically configure static networks, to going to DHCP. That's one of the major complaints. And again, we'll talk more about that on Thursday. But it is one of the complaints that people have about DHCP networks is, I'm not going to know all the IP addresses. And so we can talk about that too. I have 5 videos, I think, on how to set up your Netgear 4250 to work well with BirdDog devices. And I talk about DHCP reservation lists. So if you are unfamiliar with the 4250, or you're like, John's full of crap, go over to, you might say that anyways, but go over to the birddogjohn.tv YouTube site, and on there, is it on there? It is on there. On that site, there should be the Netgear 4250s. Is it here? Maybe I only put it up. Oh, maybe I only put that up on the Bird Dog site. Whoops-a-daisy. I'm going to have to change that. So for now, go to Bird Dog Australia over on YouTube, and under playlists, I may do this after the show, but under playlists, one of the first playlists on the list is Netgear 4250 and Bird Dog. And if you view that whole playlist, there is the last video on that list is a 9.5-minute video about setting the DHCP reservations. And that is the place that you can find out how to do that on 4250. And I did those 7 months ago. It's probably time for a refresh. I did those 7 months ago. So my shining face is is there. Our marketing team over in Melbourne made those thumbnails for me, and they're way better than anything I could put together. And so I've got 5 videos there that hopefully you can find useful. Many installers are coming from NDI from having installed Crestron NVX for years, and a lot of them have to unlearn. It's true, and it's a challenge, to put it lightly, because they're used to, I mean, and look, I understand the saga that is having to understand that there are better ways than what you learned in the past to doing the thing that you make money doing. You know, unfortunately, one of the problems in the industry is that each of the AV profiles, each of the AV, the ways of accomplishing AV in the IP realm are all designed independently from each other. I learned not too long ago that NDI, one of the major goals of NDI was to be a direct competitor with SMPTE 2110. And it hadn't dawned on me that that is what the goal was until somebody made the comparison from NewTek and said, well, it's an answer to the SMPTE 2110 complexity, which is very high bandwidth requirements and extreme setups. You know, you need to have a lot of money behind the 2110 installation, and NDI was supposed to be the less complex version. But then there's the range of extremes, and so I camp out on the yes, but you still need to understand how networking works and why there are advantages to doing things the way the DHCP way, why there are advantages to doing it that way than the what would appear to be oversimplified version of an AV network like a static network. Now, I understand perfectly well that Dante, people set things up in static on Dante and they just work. I don't run a Dante support department. That's not my realm. That's not something I specialize in. Now, I might have to if the Dante dreams become true here, but currently I don't run a Dante troubleshooting support department. That's not what we do here. And I know that there are a lot of Dante networks in the world that are straight up static run. And they, from what I hear, they work great. The confusion is that assuming that NDI is the simplified way of doing SMPTE 2110, that it should just work. And unfortunately, this is just me speaking now. This isn't some sort of message on behalf of Bird Dog or NDI. Unfortunately, I don't think the industry did itself any favors by saying it just works, because you still need to configure things to work. So then when I pitched that to a group of NDI thinkers, people that are in the industry or work for companies or whatever, I pitched that idea to them. The response that I got back from that statement was, yes, NDI just works when it's on an NDI network, which is not the same as it just works. Now, SMPTE 2110 doesn't just work. You have to configure. So again, now that I see the full picture, now I understand the comparison. Now I understand why it is that we say the things we said in the past. But we got in trouble because we oversimplified it. We made it sound like there's no configuration required at all, and that's not true. You do need to know how your network's configured, and there are better ways of doing things than alternative ways that will give you better performance. It will deliver the product that you're expecting much better than if you just get a rando switch and plug it in and start turning things on. That's not a great idea. It is much simpler than SMPTE 2110. And so it does appear there's not a whole bunch of upfront money investment, resource investment, time investment, installer investment, coordinations with, huge companies just to get this protocol to work. You could actually watch a handful of YouTube videos and get NDI to work pretty well. Matter of fact, probably operating at 90% or better in terms of performance. If you just are, resourceful with YouTube and Google, and My Knowledge Database, and a few other things. There are easier ways to set up NDI compared to things like SMPTE 2110. But we really oversimplified it. We went a little too far, and we said that there's no hindrance whatsoever. You don't even need to understand networking. That did not serve us very well. And so the purpose of this show, and like today's topic, is to really talk about, okay, we want to use static networks. When might we use them? Which is a question that I struggle with a lot, by the way. But when might we use them, and how would we configure them so that they would give us reliable results? So that's coming up. Coming up on the Bird Dog John Support Show, static networks. Everything you've ever wished to hear about static networks. How's that Dante for hardware feature coming along? Great question. Next question. With the X120 over Wi-Fi, is QoS a point to consider with address reservation? Good question. So QoS is a consideration, but QoS has changed a little bit with NDI 5. Okay, QoS is quality of service for those of you who haven't Googled it already. And QoS functions, does a bunch of things. But I would suggest that QoS, one of the functions of QoS is a packet inspector, which has the potential, especially on mid to small networks, has the potential to slow things down. It also has the potential to interrupt and to cause intermittent issues. The change, though, and this is unofficial, by the way, there's been no official word on this, but the change that we've seen is that QoS might be fine in a limited capacity. I will need to look at my switch real quick because I'm running the switch here in the studio in this configuration to test this theory, by the way. But for QoS and flow control and all of that, I have set each of the ports on this switch that I'm running here in the office to symmetric and to a frame size of 1500. Now, you can alter that in data networks. You can alter that, but that's where that's what I've changed in terms of the frame size and the flow control. I am running on just a straight data profile configuration, but I am I'm doing flow control, and that's set to symmetric, and then it's also set to the frame size is 1500. In the past, we told you to turn off flow control. We told you to let the default, because if you turn off flow control, then the default frame size is 1500 anyways. but you can force the frame size and turn on flow control, and we actually see the same, if not better, results, at least in the 4250 configuration. And that's interesting when you start introducing things like Wi-Fi, because it actually sets a frame standard for the frames coming in. Actually, an expectation, more than likely, because it doesn't really change what's happening on the NDI node, in this case the cameras. But it sets an expectation on the switch to understand how the packets are going to be traveling. And so more on this as we test, especially with the X120, mostly because the X120 is an HX camera, right? And so that HX camera is going to be operating at either a variable bitrate in HX3 or a constant bitrate with HX2. And I suspect, just speaking from looking at the tea leaves at 10,000 feet to merge two cliches together, I suspect that what we will be looking for is a HX2 signal over Wi-Fi to start. I think that will be the baseline standard. HX2 over Wi-Fi. That's what you should expect to use. And people think, well, I want to turn up the quality or lower the latency. HX2 is the lowest bit rate, the highest latency when it comes to the HX standards, okay? Which means that it will need the lowest bit rate possible, which is the first and foremost thing when interacting with access points, APs, okay, access points, wireless access points. We want the lowest bit rate possible. And people think, well, Netflix is 4K Netflix over Wi-Fi is easily 10 or 12 megs, so I should be able to do this. It's like, this is an emerging enterprise. This is an emerging technology that we cannot go from 0 to 60 immediately. We need to walk before we can run. And so HX2 on the X120, I'm assuming, by the way, I might be totally wrong. This whole segment might be void. But I'm assuming that HX2 will be the Wi-Fi standard out of the X120. I could be wrong. Kind of hope I'm wrong. But we shall see. We shall see. Hey, Albert, how's it going? I agree. I had a love-hate relationship with NDI for about 3 years because it never worked quite right on our school network. And after watching your Netgear setup videos, everything has been great. Oh, my goodness. What a humongous compliment. Thank you, Albert. I bought 2 Netgear 4250s, one for our Music Dante network and one for the NDI running separately. The music people thank me often. They've been fighting with Dante for about 5 years on the net. Love it. Well done. I love that. That completely validates all the time and effort I spent making those videos, coordinating with marketing, doing all that stuff. That made it totally worth it, 100%. I completely feel validated. Albert, you set it up. Everything's been working really well. You found success in those videos. Boom. Accomplished. I love that. Man, that is a humongous compliment. Thank you so much for saying that. Call me old-fashioned, but I like to know the IP addresses of critical resources. You are old-fashioned. All wireless is 100% reliable 30% of the time. Yes, that's a great way to think about it. Jeremy, what is going on, man? Jeremy Morris. This is the legendary Jeremy Morris from the. Well, you're over at NDI now, right? Or you work? Wait, no, you're at NewTek. Hold on, one more time. Is this is the same, the one in the same, right? This is the Jeremy Morris. Yes, it is. Who is? What's the official title now, bud? It's you've been. Oh, where is it? Shoot, I just had your title. It's right here. I'm still at NewTek. NewTek Sales Enablement. That's awesome. Well, congrats, bud. That's always good. I think we've been, passing ships in the fog for a very long time, trade shows and whatever. But I know of you. I've seen a fair bit of your work. Plus, you did a ton of social media work at Infocom this year. So what's up with that, man? That's generating some content for New Tech over at Infocom. So hopefully you had a great show, and a little bummed that I didn't get to go to that one because it looked awesome. And there were people there that I did not expect were going to be there. I didn't choose not to go. I was just not selected to go to this one. So all good. Maybe next time. But I'm glad. Oh, yeah, it was fun. That's awesome. I did see a lot of stuff showing up, LinkedIn, Facebook, a whole bunch of places with you. So that's great. Looked like you were having a good time. Wi-Fi is where all devices go to learn how to take turns talking, and we all know how well that works in real life. Yeah, that's going to be a problem. But again, we're really not going to know until we know, right? So we're going to have to get into that world before we can start really talking about performance and reliability and all that. Now, full disclosure, there are a couple of those devices operating in, I won't say mission critical locations, but in places that it needs to work and operating on Wi-Fi. And the word on the street is, now we've been doing obviously testing in Australia. The word on the street is it's working well. And so I'm excited about that. By the way, this map is a heat map of all of you who are willing to fill out the form. Scan that little QR code in the top corner of the screen and just let me know what country and what city you're in. And that should put a pin on the map for me. And then, yeah, we get a live view as to where everybody's from. So always fun to see who's watching and from where, and I really appreciate that. So, yeah, hang out with us. And as that map fills out over the show, we will continue to show it. So feel free to use that reoccurring QR code, and, yeah, we'll go from there. Somebody's checked in from Detroit, from New Orleans, and from Atlanta. Oh, and Portland. So we got a lot of – I have a strong U.S. viewership. I think my Canadians are all really busy this week, or this week and last week, so they may not check in, but hopefully they'll return to the show shortly. Cool stuff. All right. Well, maybe I should have Jeremy join us for an understanding of static networks, because he'd probably be able to speak confidently in his understanding of how that all works. But I definitely want to take a few minutes. I've taken 47 minutes of this hour just to get to this point, and so I will. Let's chat for a few minutes about it, and I will record this portion of it, and then we'll get back to the comments after we're done. I don't know entirely how long I'm going to rant about this, but it's not going to be a rant. It's going to be an attempt to kind of understand static networks and how they all work. So let's go ahead and do that, and then and we'll take your comments afterwards. All right. So we want to take a few minutes today to just talk through this concept of networking and how we design our networks to operate correctly with NDI in a broad range of theaters. Okay, so I have spoken to probably hundreds of installers or clients or people along the way who are installing NDI in various places, and it is very much so, like what was said earlier in the show, a habit of how it is that we design our networks to operate. And as time progresses, things get better, right? But one of the older styles of doing things is to just set everything up with its own static IP address, and then you know where everything is, and you should be able to find it quickly on the network. It also, in theory, requires a lot less sophistication on the design front, meaning that you can deploy them quickly, should be pretty straightforward, and then they should, just never change. Nothing will ever change because you've set the settings as is. Well, there are some things to consider when we talk about static networks, mostly because static networks are the traditional way for a very long time that AV over IP has been done. Standards like, Dante, for example, is one of the key elements where they can be set with static IP addresses, and then those things never change. And the data that's passed between those endpoints is pretty minimal, and so it doesn't require a whole lot of sophistication or traffic routing or anything like that to really make it happen. But when we talk about high-performance video, which is really what NDI is, it is that beautiful merriment of high-performance, low-latency video for an IP standard. It is the best that's out there. hands down. I don't know of another one that's better than NDI. That's as sophisticated and as it delivers the quality that it does. And that's not me just being biased. Just NDI in general is by far the easiest in the AV over IP video realm, particularly. It delivers the best quality for the lowest amount of overhead, meaning that it doesn't take a whole lot to get you up and running. But static networks have always been kind of a problem, mostly because when you design a static network for NDI, like you would design one for Dante or like you would design one for other AV standards, we really lose out on some of the sophistication that comes along with, other styles of networks, in particular DHCP. So how do we set this up? How do we think about static networks so that they will work consistently so I can have the things that I want, but I can deliver the NDI standard? And there's a couple of pieces that are really key here. The very first thing out of the gates is you really need to be operating in a layer 2 or layer 3 switching environment. What this is going to provide you with is the switches and the network infrastructure that you're running will have the processing power to transfer the amount of data that we're talking about, right? So in a NDI HX, let's just say HX2 world, you're moving at the speed anywhere from maybe 3 to 10 megs. If you're in HX3, you're running anywhere from, 5 or 6 all the way to whatever you want to turn it into. And in full NDI, for full HD, which is a 1080p 60 signal, you're easily talking 140 megs a second. Okay, so we're talking about a ton of data that's actually happening at lightning speed. And if we take away the actual managed portion of the network, if we take away the layering portion of the network, and we just have a basic unmanaged network, there is really no way that data is going to successfully, over long periods of time, get from point A to point B without having some sort of hiccup. And so it's really important that at least we have the processing power required to pass large, enormous amounts of data at lightning speed. And the way you do that is you buy a switch that has some level of sophistication. Look for layer 2 or layer 3 switches. Now, a layer 2 switch is just mostly a managed switch that operates on the network layer 2, okay? We can get into, I'll do this at a later time talking about the actual layers of a network. But being able to pass IP information, being able to understand routes through the network, that's what we're talking about with layer 2. Most layer 2 switches are going to have, for example, an onboard routing table. What that is a packet will come in and it's going to a destination. And over time, that routing table is going to accumulate data and remember data as to where certain endpoints are. And so if we have a network, even just a single switch network, and the packet comes in and says, hey, I need to go to 192.168.1.12, a layer 2 switch will know which port to send that packet. Okay, it will have the routing data logged and saved internally so that it knows if I need to get to that IP address, or if a packet needs to get to that IP address, I need to go out this port because that's where they're located. All right. A layer 3 is something that can govern networks. Okay, so this usually has something like a DHCP service on it or has the ability to do that. It can set up its own VLANs. Okay, so it can isolate and configure VLANs. It can govern VLANs. All right, so if you have devices that are joining networks that are set in DHCP, that layer 3 can issue an IP address for that VLAN, even if that switch doesn't have that VLAN on it. It has multiple layers. It provides a number of services. It will do something called router delegation, which means that in a sophisticated network, and you have multiple, let's say, layer 2 switches, it will figure out who is the top dog on the chain and delegate that routing table to be the master. And then the master list gets aggregated out to the other switches in line, the other layer 2s. And so everybody has up-to-date information. It means that that switch is responsible for, when something changes on the network, logging that information on the master routing table and then delegating that out. Okay, it's another layer, it's another level of sophistication. But to do NDI in general, you need to at least have a layer 2. Something that has onboard memory, something that has a relatively decent processor, something that has the ability to process packets. In SOHO unmanaged switches, a lot of that, it's not a universal statement, but a lot of that is not available. It isn't even on board. The Silicon's not able to actually do that. It doesn't have any sort of high capacity processing ability. It's usually just a quick, easy, out of the box, could even be an ARM process. That's just basic routing. Time is not of the essence. And it's really hard to qualify which unmanaged switches and which ones do and which ones don't. Because there are some out there that operate okay. It's not a hard and fast rule. There are some out there that, okay, perhaps we can get away with that. But the issue then becomes expandability when you start plugging in additional devices or additional computers even, or additional nodes on the network. Can that thing really keep up? Can it delegate? Can it isolate a problem? Can you prioritize? Things like that on a layer 2 switch traditionally means that it's a managed switch. Now, there is a difference, by the way, between smart managed and managed. So if you're going to Amazon right now and you're like, okay, let's just find out what I'm in for here. If you're going to Amazon or you're going to your favorite, network purchasing realm, type in layer 2 managed switch. And anything that comes up that says smart managed, ignore that. Because a smart managed switch is essentially, again, not a hard and fast rule, but it is essentially a unmanaged switch an unmanaged switch with a web interface. Let's put it that way. It is generally cost effective. Okay, it's going to be lower in price, but it's going to also be lower in performance. So you want to start on a layer 2 managed switch. And a great example of this is the entry-level switches for the M4250 realm, the Netgear M4250 realm. Those are layer 2 managed switch. Actually, they're layer 3s, but we won't overcomplicate things. So the 4212, okay, that entry-level switch that's in the 4250 series, that's a great layer 2 switch to kind of start your brain in thinking. Now, Netgear goes one step forward and customizes it for NDI, which is a huge advantage to you as the end user, but this isn't a Netgear commercial. This is about static networks. So the first thing you need to do is get a managed layer 2 switch at least. The next thing you need to do, though, is to understand the base functions that you're losing, okay, when you're configuring static. NDI devices, from what I can gather, NDI devices generally assume that the network has been informed. All right? That could be maybe the title of today's show. They assume that the network has been informed. But when people configure static networks for AV installations, they actually are doing it so they don't have to do all the extra customization. Okay? But it doesn't change the fact that NDI devices assume that the network is aware of what's going on. And so when you set a static IP address on a network node, which is what NDI devices are, they are not computers. Okay? Bird Dog devices, NDI devices, they're not computers. They're nodes. They're NDI nodes. They're just network. They are devices on a network that have been assigned an IP, and they're doing their job at that location. That's what they're doing. They're not navigating the network. They're not learning who's who. They don't have an internal routing table. They're not pinging the network to find out, hey, sending out a lookup table or anything. They're not doing any of that. They've been assigned an IP address, and they're doing the one job that they're supposed to do, and that is send video down the line or decode. But people make these assumptions that they're like Windows computers or a Mac, or they're, even like Raspberry Pis, where they have these iOS interfaces that are doing all this network navigation, and they are not. They are nodes on a network. And a node, all that is a device doing a job at that location. So with that in mind, when you start making connections, right, you start saying, okay, I want that camera to go to this decoder. How is that information getting across the network if there's nothing actually steering the traffic? So we've got, let's say, an unmanaged switch and everything's set up in static. Well, when you power them on, the devices will send out a broadcast packet, and anybody that's listening will be able to see it. But if there's nothing that's actually keeping track of that routing information, that information is going to go away. And so, thus was born, I don't think in this sequence, but NewTek did everybody a massive favor, or NDI now, I guess is the proper way to think about it. NDI did everyone a massive favor and invented Discovery Server. Now, what is Discovery Server? Well, Discovery Server is the way that you can point your devices at something that is listening and then can provide routing information to those who want to decode that information. And so I always think now, it took me a while to get to this point in life, but I think Discovery Server was meant to be a part of every NDI installation. If you were doing NDI on a network, it was kind of assumed, I think, that you would use a Discovery Server, mostly because it optimizes whatever network you've chosen to use, whether you're using static or DHCP. So to optimize, to make things more efficient, and I genuinely believe this, by the way, to make things more efficient, you would run a Discovery Server. And Discovery Server would help direct traffic through the network. So requirement number 2, the first is you need a managed switch. You need a layer 2 managed switch. The second thing is you need to be running a Discovery Server, which requires a Windows PC at base, okay? So a computer that is on all the time. This can be a VM, by the way, but it's a computer that's on all the time on your NDI network. And you'll notice that inside of all BirdDog devices, but all NDI devices, anyone's worth their salt at least, they have an option to add a Discovery Server. And so you would run Discovery Server, which just looks like a little MS-DOS prompt. Okay, add it to your Windows startup. When Windows boots up and the user logs in, Discovery Server turns on. And because you're running in a static environment, you would set your computer to have a static IP address. And then when you fire things up, you would turn on Discovery Server. It would operate at the IP address that that your computer static IP address is at. And then on all of your NDI devices, every single one of them on the network, you would type in the IP address of and hunt and peck if you have to. You would put in the IP address of the Discovery Server and hit on and then apply. And then probably restart video just to give it a fresh start. Whenever you do network changes on a network node, this is just a general good practice is to probably restart them to make sure the change took, but also then to start fresh and new the way that the Discovery Server is configured. And you should see, you watch Discovery Server, and it's really cool now because they have a kind of a graphical interface that's happening on that DOS prompt. You would see when the node comes online, you would see that it's registered with Discovery Server. Now, Discovery Server then could gather that information, and then any decoders that appear on your network that are pointed at Discovery Server would be able to see any sort of sources that are on the network. This is ideally, I think, the way to operate in static. But you're probably thinking, man, this doesn't seem a whole lot easier. It seemed more complicated to do this in static. And I would say, yes, you're right. It does appear to be more complicated, mostly because you have to have more stuff set up to do that. So not only do you need to set all the static IP information in all of your network nodes, not only do you have to configure a Windows or a Linux machine, by the way, which is being sent over here in the chat. It does run on Linux as well, if you'd like. You have to have that machine on constantly, 24/7, or at least whenever you want your NDI network to work. It needs to be probably booted first, by the way. And then in the sequence, so if you're run and gun and you have to run static, you'd want that machine to turn on prior to your NDI network really powering on. So you need to have everything pointed at Discovery Server. You need to have that Discovery Server running constantly. You need to make sure that that service is up and running. And then you would need to then configure your entire infrastructure to operate that way. There are a lot of places. This is my warning about static. There are a lot of places to get it wrong. Okay? There are a lot of places to screw it up. And I've seen it over and over and over. I've seen it where people don't put in default gateways. And you think, well, I have a static network. I don't have a gateway. Yes, but you have to put that information in. When you go to static, that's one of the boxes you have to fill out. And so if you don't have a static gateway, or if you don't have a default gateway in a static configuration, here's a little pro tip. Set it to the IP address of the Windows machine that's running Discovery Server. That will help. But there are multiple ways of messing it up. And that's the danger, is that although it may seem on the surface as this is the way I've always done it, this is the way that it makes sense to me in my brain, there are so many places for you to miss a digit, to put in the wrong information, to put in the same IP address, for example, for two devices, which would give you an IP conflict. There are so many places for this to go wrong. Now, you, of course, would never screw it up. But I'm talking about other people messing it up, and especially other people who didn't set it up and install it. Maybe they get in and they start thinking, man, this IP address isn't working for this camera. I'll just change it to the next digit up, not realizing that you have that set for a computer, which isn't outputting NDI, right? That's not its function. That's the Discovery Server, or that's something else. There's so many places for this to go south. And so instead, you really need to know top down how it's configured and what functions it how it needs to power on, what sequence it needs to turn on, how it necessarily needs to be, all of the little fields and everything have to be double and triple checked just to make sure that this configuration works. And it can be daunting then trying to explain. So let's say you set this up for a customer, and then it's your job to explain how it's configured and how they can use it. And you might think, oh, it's so easy. Everything's just preset. You don't need to change anything. It's all well and good until something goes wrong or a device stops responding and they need to try and troubleshoot it. There's just so many places. This is my massive hesitation with static, is there's just so many places for this to go south. And we could use a system that doesn't leave too many openings for that to happen. At least we could mitigate how many problems that we're having. So static networks have their place. I'll round it out by saying it this way. This wasn't going to be a rah-rah speech for static networks, but I can say this. I have seen static networks successfully used in the NDI realm. I have seen poor static configurations, and I have seen better static configurations. If you're going to do static, I strongly recommend that you look at managed layer 2 switches or better, or more sophisticated, so layer 3, and you look at, you have to run Discovery Server, which requires a Windows machine or a Linux machine to run constantly, full-time, all the time. Now, I would love to test, in theory, running Discovery Server on something like a Raspberry Pi on a Linux, just because it's so lightweight that you might be able to fit that into a freight case and have that power up on a sequencer, and it would work probably pretty well. But if you have to do static and you have to configure every single unit, then be sure that you're using a managed switch and be sure that you're running a Discovery Server and everything on your network is pointed to that Discovery Server. I think you'll have the best results that way. And yes, then you don't have to give up your assigned IP addresses the way that you're comfortable configuring those networks. But if you're willing to go one step further, there may be a little easier and a little more sophisticated way of accomplishing the same goal with some redundancies built in so that when things do go wrong, they're not so difficult to troubleshoot. So there you go. It can be done. I promise you, static networks can be done. It's just a little more complicated if you must. Now, we'll do another session. We'll do part 2, and we'll talk about DHCP services and why I think that this is the path forward for the majority of NDI users. If you have a use case where static is just the only option, I would love to hear more about it. We'll jump over the chat after this segment and talk through some of that. Always willing to discuss, in what scenario that might be better received. I haven't found too many cases where it's absolutely mission critical, other than the IT departments are just not willing to have a dynamic license or a dynamic IP address. But beyond that, if you're the one setting up the network, I haven't found too many folks who just would not do a different configuration other than static, other than it's just their preference. So, all right, join us next time. We're going to talk about those other network configurations and give you some insight as to other ways to design your NDI network, and that'll be next time. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too painful, everybody. Thanks for following along. I am going to jump over to the little heat map here. I did take down the QR code when I started that segment. I'll put that back up. If you just started joining us during that segment, scan that QR code with your phone. Let me know what country and what city you're in, and you will appear on this map as a pinned location, which I think is just the coolest. Yeah, I love this stuff, man. So thanks for following along. I will get to the chat here because I did see you guys chatting. I know that many of you listed that there's a Linux discovery server as well. I do want to try it out on that Raspberry Pi. I think that would be a really cool, inexpensive way to run Discovery Server full time, but I'm not too sure. Hey, what's going on? Somebody else checked in over at, let me get it, Stockholm, Sweden. I know who you are. I just can't say your name because I'm afraid I'll butcher it. So yes, there are some, I would really like to, has anybody run it on a Raspberry Pi? Is that at all a consideration that someone has done? Lubbock, Texas checking in. I think I know who you are. Welcome to the show. Thanks for stopping by today. Hey, I got to jump on another meeting, John. Let's set up a joint call at some time. That'd be great, Jeremy. I'd appreciate it, man. It would be great I should just have you on the show and do a little interview. I'd love to have a chat with you guys over at NewTek. You're always doing exciting stuff, so that'd be fun. There's also a Linux discovery server. There's Discovery for Linux. There's Discovery for Linux. Hey, do you have any tips for Meraki switches? Do you know of sites that are using this? Well, Meraki is a spinoff. Is it Cisco or HP? Meraki is a Cisco brand. So I don't know of AV realms that are doing Meraki stuff necessarily. None come to mind. I tested Meraki switches for a AP data installation I was doing ages ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and they performed pretty well. I mean, they have that Cisco smell to them, so they work all right, but I definitely went with something else. I'll put it that way. And I don't know. I wasn't thrilled with them. Now, again, this was years ago, and technology moves very fast. And so it doesn't necessarily anyways, I can't speak knowledgeably about the Meraki brand. Although I do know that there are probably people here in the chat that are using Meraki. They aren't AV IP specific, and so it's hard to validate them. But the Discovery server seems like a single point of failure. It seems that if you have a static IP, you always know how to get to that device over an IP network because it never changes. If you are using static, you know you need a gateway. This is basic. The duplicate IP possibility is a valid point. Thank you. So here's the thing: is that what's governing the traffic on your network? What's governing the traffic on your static network if there is like no routing table, if there's no, like, there might be a default gateway, but like the design, the part in which I think we failed the public And this is a bird dog problem just as much as it is anybody else. But the piece that I think we failed, folks, is that we just said, just plug it in, assign an IP address, and off you go. And that's not true. Something has to be governing the network. And then when it came out later on, that was like, well, yeah, it's a plug and play device as long as it's the NDI network is configured correctly. It's like, that's not the same thing. And that's where I got really frustrated with the industry, and why I go to the lengths that I go to when I talk about networking is it's like, you still need something to govern the traffic. And static networks on an unmanaged switch, a TP-Link switch that you bought at Best Buy for $40, and it has no governing ability, and it's literally just an unmanaged 5-port switch that has PoE capability, and you're plugging in your cameras and you're wondering why you're getting drop packets. It shouldn't be that surprising that we would say something like, it's the switch, it's the network capability, it's not able to pass it. And if you set everything to static and you plug it all into an unmanaged switch, and it's like, well, it's a simple network. It's like, yes, but you're dealing with 140 megs, right? Like that's not just a small amount of data. That's an immense amount of data. And then if you're doing multiples, like now we're compounding the issue. So you have to have something that's actually going to drive the data to the endpoint and get it there in a timely manner. And so I think that there's too much room for error. Okay? I think that there's way too much room for somebody to mess it up in that configuration. And we got to do better about mitigating the points of failure that people will encounter, especially when you decide not to run the network anymore. It's like, it's a little callous to say, well, if I'm not in charge, then I don't care. But that really says something, pretty rough about thinking long term for your employer, for whoever. It's like, well, just because you're not involved, you should probably set this up for success regardless if you're around or not. Again, that's getting into a realm that's beyond just what the capacity of the show is. But for me, I want this thing to work. If I'm driving home and I get in a bad car accident, I'm MIA for the next 6 months. I want my network to basically continue to run without people needing to know all my trade secrets, right? And so we design our networks for people to use them, and I think there's a much more sophisticated, a much more user-friendly way to do it than everything runs on static. Now we have to run this discovery server. People have to know that thing exists in order for it to work correctly. You have to know how to restart it. They have to know if it goes down, what's the issue. To answer the single point of failure question, the latest NDI 5 version actually allows for redundancy discovery servers, which is really cool. Basically, if one of them goes down, the other one is still working. Now, BirdDog devices, as of right now, don't have the ability to put in multiple discovery servers, but that has been brought up to engineering as, hey, this is a feature in NDI 5. We need to integrate this, so they're aware of that option. So I think NDI heard the concern about redundancy, single point of failure. We want to use discovery server, but if it goes down, our whole network's down. Like, that's not going to work. I think they heard that, and their response was, okay, well, now you can have multiples, and they can be redundant. And so for the price of 2 Raspberry Pis, now you can have one that's out of commission and one that's in, and they can come and go as they need to, and the whole system continues to work. That's a really cool idea. Now, how fast the market and the manufacturers get on board, that I don't know. That I don't know how quickly that will be, but there you go. Will Discovery Server also listen to broadcasts from devices not pointed to the Discovery Server? No, it will not. So I'm old-fashioned, but I've somehow had a discovery issue with Trika. Let me run over to Facebook here and just make sure I'm reading this correctly. I'm old-fashioned, but I've somehow had a discovery issue. I'm assuming that's TriCaster. Lost a camera, and I had ... That was the end of the sentence. We'll come back to that, Joe. With Discovery Server, is there a way to see what it knows and who it sees on the network? It seems like a very black box, and if you miss the CLI output, how do you know it is discovered? Yes, so this is an interesting thing that I was thinking through while talking about Discovery Server. I don't know of a way to like show list, right? To like show the actual list of what devices it sees. I wonder if there is a way to send that command though, to like show all, you know? I don't know. But that would be, hey, if anybody from NDI is watching, that'd be a really cool feature to have, and just be able to like pause the list, type in like show dash all and hit enter, and it gives you the whole list of all the devices that it's registered, and then hit enter again and the list keeps going. But that's probably way easier conceptualized than programmed. So if it doesn't happen right away, I'll understand. Yeah, I know a person who uses, I'm assuming, there's a Raspberry Pi. I know a person who does. You download the SDK for Linux so you can run it. Very cool. I need to see that. Run NDI server on a TriCaster? Our campus is installing Meraki. Okay. I believe you can run NDI server on a TriCaster, yes. Once you have a fully configured network, you can plug in any NDI device and it will, quote, just work. Yeah, that was the irony of that statement. It's like, as long as your network is NDI, is NDI ready, then it'll be fine. And I thought, wait, that's not what people are hearing. And that's certainly not what we're saying. The price of 2 Raspberry Pis, that's like more than a market cap. Hey, Micro Center. If there's a Micro Center around, or a Fry's Electronics, they're starting to get them in. I think they're $60 a piece. But yes, the Raspberry Pi, during the components shortage of the COVID age, those prices went sky high. Right now on Amazon, they went like $120 for a Raspberry Pi. I was like, okay, easy there. I'll just drive over to Micro Center and pick one up for half the price. I can think of another problem with static if you have a non-standard or a CIDR net mask that is less understood than default gateway. We use a WAC23 networks with 512 nodes per subnet. TriCaster lost the camera and I had to use the IP on your static network. Yeah, it's because it stopped broadcasting. Interesting. Yeah, the WAC23 networks. We always say WAC24 in our network design, 256, mostly because if you are running if you need 512 IPs for your NDI network, you need to be running multicast anyway. The TCP IP unicast realm is just not going to be great. And so you need to be, especially if you're doing multi-decoders, hands down, stop talking about unicast and switch to multicast, because your performance is just going to be astronomically better, especially with Meraki or Cisco, or like they can handle multicast. So don't hesitate to configure it for multicast. But configure your network for multicast first and then enable multicast on your devices. Don't do it the other way around or you're going to have a brutal time. But if you need 512 nodes on your network, we should review what it is that you're doing, because you may want to break those up, especially if you're running unicast that big. So WAC23 is, I get it, but it is a little much for an NDI network. I think it's assumed WAC24, which is only 556 or 554, depending on who you ask. I think someone needs to reverse. Hey, what's going on, Tom? I think somebody needs to reverse engineer the NDI Discovery Server protocol and make one that has useful information, probably a web UI. I mean, it's not a bad idea to just be able to show the list, or to like output the list every minute or every 2 minutes or something, just by default. Just be like complete list and then just keep going. That would be very, very helpful, because then you wouldn't have to scroll forever to see it. Pro tip, if you hit enter on Discovery Server and it pauses, you pause the NDI function in NDI 5. It used to just pause the screen, and NDI Discovery Server would just run in the background with NDI 4. But the NDI 5 Discovery Server, it appears that if you hit enter, or any button for that matter, it will pause the actual service, and your whole NDI network will disappear. So, pro tip, there you By renaming the device, the Spark device rebroadcasts its info, and the TriCaster found the device. So that sounds like an MDNS issue. If you need to change the name of the local name of the device, then maybe see if your MDNS is crapping out. Discovery servers don't see each device go to register to the list. But what's going on, MX Rules? Good to see you. But the servers don't know if it's turn on or not. It's just a list. So the devices. So when you, I think I understand what you're saying here. The devices, when you turn on Discovery Server, the BirdDog NDI device stops broadcasting its information and just sends its information to that IP address that you specified, the Discovery Server. And the Discovery Server will be listening, and it will see that packet come in and add it to the list. Okay? What's also really cool is it's a live list. And so if I unplug that camera, it will show removed on the Discovery Server list. That's the beautiful thing about it, is it creates a bond between the NDI device and the Discovery Server, and it keeps that list up to date. So if you go to a decoder and you say, and it's pointed at Discovery Server, and then you say refresh, it will ask Discovery Server for the latest list, and those devices that have come and gone will be on or not on appropriately. It's beautiful. It's a really helpful tool, and I strongly recommend investing a little bit in if you're going to do static, investing a little bit in that realm. That's what Network gives us. The MDNS announced packet storm alone on a WAC 23 would necessitate Discovery Server to quiet things down. Ooh, good call, NetHab. Yes, I think you're actually right on that. It's definitely against the privacy policy. Oh, of ripping apart Discovery. Yeah, don't do that. I'm not recommending that. NDI 4.5 Discovery Server broke the page update properly. NDI 5 broke the input. It seems like Discovery Server needs some love. Potentially, I don't know. But to each his own. Now, it is 12:26. I have a big giant clock. I'm using BirdDog Multiviewer Pro, which is beautiful, by the way. Shout out to Jan and his engineers over there in Oslo. Pretty rock on. Love that program, and it's very useful. But I have two giant clocks that are telling me what time it is, and so I can kind of keep it in realm. Well, one of the things that I want to do today is I want to do Snacks on Stream, and I haven't done them yet because Balu has dropped off a special Snacks on Stream, which I am going to enjoy, but I'm going to have to restrain myself because there's a whole bunch of sugar in this one, and I'm trying not to eat a whole bunch of sugar. So I will enjoy this, but then I'll return these, and the guys out in the office will also do them. So let's do that first, and we'll be right back.
John's just making up stuff to start drama.
Look, I don't know.
Look at him.
Wish me luck, folks. It's my first Vegemite experience. Final, this is like cheese flavor or something. It doesn't really look too appetizing.
Good golly, this is something else, man.
Here's the thing about Pop Rocks, and I don't know if I'm the only one like this. Pop Rocks have always been a social experience for me.
I did not think that is what you were going to say. That's hilarious.
That is awful. Oh, God, that's so bad. Jeez. Holy smokes, man.
Yep. That was a doozy. We're going to check out some cotton candy Oreos today. Thanks, Balu, for dropping this off. Wow, my table is... let's put that over the little coffee stain there. This looks really good. So I know that he saved some for the crew out in the lobby, and so he had opened this just prior to the show. So I'm looking forward to trying this out. Check that out. Proper Oreo. We're going to... that's a multicolored, and it's got it's got that classic... it's got that classic Oreo smell. So we're gonna give this a go while we continue to chat about what appears to be a lengthy discussion about Discovery Server. So those Oreos confuse my brain. Hey, what's going on, Senseless? Welcome to the show. They confuse your brain? Why is that? Am I about to find out? Let's find out together. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is confusing. What is the recommended serving size? 2 cookies. Don't they mean 2 sleeves? Okay. I'll pack the rest of this box up. But they do confuse my brain. The flavor is just so bizarre. That is a bizarre flavor. It's like a hint of cotton candy, but whoops. But they're like vanilla Oreos. Kind of have like a Girl Guide taste to them. Yeah, that's weird. That's very weird. I mean, that's quite the experience. Thanks, Balu. I appreciate that. I'm not going to stop eating them. I got to go. Thanks for today. Tom, always a pleasure. Take care of yourself, man. Hey, let's jump over and if you're just joining us, there's this little QR code on the top of the screen up there. Check that out. If you want to join my little heat map of where everybody is, it'd be a whole lot of fun to have you join us. So do that, and if you're so inclined. Also, don't forget this show. Its home is at birddogjohn.tv. So if you wouldn't mind, subscribe to that show. You can do whatever you want. The bell notification. I don't know how people like to use that thing, but if you would subscribe, that would be a big help. And any videos that you find useful on that channel, please hit the like button, because as that grows, then I'll know what type of content to make. So the more likes on a video, the more stuff I'll generate just like that. So that's a good way to indicate to me that you found it useful. You can use the dislike button. I do see those as well. But I really appreciate it. If you don't find it particularly useful for yourself, you don't have to do anything. But if you did find it useful, hit that like button, because that would help me out, kind of differentiate what people want to learn. And I'd rather produce content that you want to use. So, there's that. So, now, he doesn't know that I'm going to do this, but also, everybody knows Mr. Tom St. Clair over at EasternShoreBroadcasting.com. Now, I think last week he was at Infocom, so he didn't have a show. But he has a show on YouTube. He references himself as the streaming idiot, or one of the streaming idiots. And it's not a name I gave him, but he's at Eastern Shore Broadcasting, and he is a great resource as well. He is probably the GOAT of NDI streaming at this point. And so I encourage you to go over and check out his channel. He's a good guy to know, and usually extremely helpful when it comes to having questions. Or he's actually a pro with vMix. He's one of the reasons why I use vMix now. He helped convert me. But yes, feel free to check out his show. His show is on Wednesday afternoons. So my show's Tuesday, Thursdays. His show's Wednesday afternoons, and you can hang out. Those cookies are way sweeter than the original ones. Agreed. Cheers, John. 12:30 a.m. in Australia. I will watch the remainder later today. Thank you so much for coming by. I appreciate you hanging out past midnight, Brent, to be with us. So thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Awesome. Okay. Well, it is 12:30, and this is normally when I wrap things up. So I will do that. It's 12:30 here, but PM. It's 12 hours in Australia away. So Brent's going to go to bed, I think. I hope. But we're going to wrap things up. Get back to work. One of my guys is out today, so we got to make sure that we got all our bases covered. But I will be back on Thursday. So feel free to synchronize your watches, or better yet, just head over to birddogjohn.tv and subscribe to that show, and set your notifications however you set those notifications. And I'd be happy I would be honored to have your subscription to that channel. It's free for anybody who has YouTube. And we are in other places. I'm on Twitch. I'm just not really like driving viewership to there. But I'm on Twitch, and I'm on, this is obviously also on the Bird Dog Australia channel on YouTube. I think I'm sending this to LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn, Bird Dog LinkedIn page, the user group in Facebook. There should be an event over there. And then the Twitter account. So the support desk has a Twitter account, help_BirdDogTV. And yeah, we are on Twitter. So feel free to join us over there. And you can also tweet at us if you have any questions. You're on a site and you need it to just be quick. You can hit me up on that channel, and it is live. You can hit me up on that channel and tweet at us, and it'll actually create a ticket for you. So that's really cool. So we're trying to be available in a few places where we can, but we can still manage the workload, trying not to let it kind of get way out ahead of us. One of these days, I'm going to talk about support philosophy, but I'm not necessarily that brave this week. So this week, we're going to talk about networks. And on Thursday, it's going to be a ripping show about DHCP. So I hope you're as amped up about that as I am. Looking forward to that. And special thanks to everybody who participated in my little heat map, because that's always fun. I fired that up at the beginning of the show, and man, I love that. So it looks really cool. Thank you for checking in all over the world. As always, it is a pleasure to have you on the show and chat things through. So hopefully this week has found you well. Take care of yourselves out there. Take care of each other. Super important these days, folks. There's not a whole lot of that going on in the world, so you can definitely be the difference. But take care of yourselves. Have a great start to the week, and we will be looking for you on Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for at least 60 minutes right here, birddogjohn.tv. And we're going to talk about another networking style. And it looks like I've got a few topics to go after, so we will plan out the future shows shortly. I've got some things hopefully in the works that will be exciting to kind of chat through, so just even like production stuff. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to what we're going to do in the next few shows. And in the meantime, be well. Have a great start to the week. We'll see you closer to the end. And I better get a bumper video ready here, because who knows whatever we're going to do. So, all right. Take care, guys. Appreciate you lots. We'll see you next time. Bye.
You didn't say the magic word.
How neat is that?